I'm Kier.
I'm Haley.
And I'm Jay from Gallifrey Public Radio,
a podcast member of the GonnaGeek network.
Just like the one you're listening to right now.
The opinions expressed are those of each individual.
Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
And get ready, because geekiness begins in 3,
2,
1.
This is it. The part of your week where you get to put your headphones on, relax, and listen to a bunch of geeks geek out about geeky things. They're passionate.
Did you know Magic Mike XXL is actually on the top 25 list of this year's best movie?
They're witty.
He loves him some Katy Perry because she kissed a girl and she liked it.
They're crazy.
I like Nickelback personally, but, I'm the fuddy-duddy who likes episode 1.
And sometimes they leave you wondering, what the f***?
I'm pretty sure that here we were starting the hashtag movement, bring back Slave Feral.
Welcome to the GonnaGeek.com podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 136 of the official GonnaGeek.com podcast. My name is Steven Jondra, and with me today is the whole crew. We are reunited and it feels so good. And I didn't sing that because that would be possible YouTube legal problems. So with me is Chris Farrell.
What's up, fellas?
We also have the one and only Pioneer, Stargate.
It's March and it's the madness.
SP, before we introduce JS, I have a question for you. When you fill out the box where it's like Mr. Mrs., is there like a little box? Because I don't think that a Pioneer of Stargates can actually fall into any ticky boxes on any forms. I feel like you are omnigender.
I am the one, the only. There can be only one Stargate Pioneer. That is. And of course, my friends call me SP. You said last time that you weren't going to call me SP, and then 30 seconds later, you called me SP. So I feel like you've reneged on your own deal right away.
Meh, that's what I do. I don't stand for anything. And finally, we have the one and only JS, French-Canadian sensation, joining us back after a week away. JS, we missed you.
Do you know that I've known SP for over a year, maybe even more now, and I don't know his full name?
It's Stargate Pioneer.
It's Stargate Pioneer.
Stargate Pioneer.
Sometimes it's hyphenated -Feral. Just depends on whether or not they're going
Sponsored, by the way.
How's everybody's weeks going so far?
So far, so
Pretty
good.
good. Yeah, for a Monday, it's not so bad. It went by fast.
I agree. I was at a off-site work event, which, whenever they call you off-site, you always wonder whether or not you're going to ever see your office again. So, bonus, I did. So that's a check mark there. But they were doing it because it was a larger group, and so they rented a hall. And I noticed they used a Behringer board, yet it was smaller than mine. So I believe that means that I am more superior to a hotel. There you go.
You win.
Gee, I wonder which one of you makes more revenue in a year.
Probably them, because I make no revenue.
That's my point.
But I have the better soundboard.
Doesn't matter what size the board is.
It's how they use it.
All right, well, let's just go ahead and jump into the news. Should we do that?
Why don't we do that?
Alrighty. Alrighty, so starting us off in the news today, we are going to have Chris wrap it up.
Well, that's a double entendre of a title, but I guess we're talking about a show wrapping up. I don't know if you guys noticed, but on Saturday evening, Mythbusters wrapped its 14th year on the air. It was kind of a sad moment, but at the same time, they kind of went out with a bang, literally. I don't know if you'd seen it. They did 4 experiments to close things up. The first thing they did was they blew up an RV with a slow-mo cam that captured at 10,000 frames per second, which was actually pretty dang cool to see because you could literally see the shockwave form and just spread across the screen. It's the most frames per second they've captured an explosion at. So awesome to see. They used 850 pounds of explosive to make that happen. That was pretty sweet.
That's cool.
I like to blow things up.
Yes. They also then built another truck wedge. So basically, they put a wedge on the front of a semi-truck, and they drove through 14 years worth of props and things they'd set up for experiments, including the replica motorcycle from the Indiana Jones and Last Crusade, things like that. And I will fully admit, Adam went through there about 45 miles an hour, just destroying things, cursing and laughing. But before that, he had a moment where he goes, I started walking through all these, he goes, and it made me tear up. And then I looked at myself and I went, and this is making me tear up, hearing him talk about walking through 14 years of memories that he's just about to destroy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Nothing lasts forever. No, especially on Mythbusters. They all blow everything up in course of an episode. So it's great.
And there were two other myths they captured in the very final episode. They gave a fond farewell to Buster. If you're not familiar, that's their crash test dummy they use for everything. They strapped him to the rocket sled and shot him forward at 780 miles an hour into a brick wall, and he literally disintegrated. So that was one hell of a send-off for Buster. They, in the post-show, then presented portions of it in a plexiglass box to Carrie, Tori, and Grant, which was hilarious. And then the final thing, because we all know Jamie like Big Boom is one of the catchphrases the Mythbusters were most well known for. One of their most popular explosions ever is when they blew up a cement mixer. So they recreated the blow up of the cement mixer, but used the most explosive they've ever used on the show, using 5,001 pounds of ANFO to blow up a cement truck, and captured that on high-speed camera. And that was their send-off, was Adam and Jamie sitting at a crater going, well, what do we do now? And walking off. Before there was then a reunion show, which I see Suncast in the chat room said, I actually like the reunion episode better than the finale. It was kind of cool to see them reflect back on that. But my question is for you guys, Mythbusters kind of came in at the perfect time when being a geek was becoming cool again. Science was cool, inspired a lot of kids to get into science, to get into myth-busting of their own. If you look back, I'm sure you guys have probably seen some episodes considering it's been on for 14 years. What do you have to say is your favorite myth that sticks with you? It's a tough question, I realize.
I like the car with the rocket on top of it. That's my favorite myth, because that was just pervasive when we were growing up. Yeah, some guy took an old Impala, put a rocket on top, and never saw him again, stuff like that. So yeah, it's good to bust those myths.
It really is.
Yeah. That was good, but to me, the one that always stuck with it, because I've heard the stories that came with it, and my understanding, I haven't seen it, my understanding is that they actually talked a little bit about it in the finale, but the underwater myth, because I know that has actually saved people's lives, showing how you can open your door if it gets submerged in water. I know that there's actually stories that come with that.
So in the reunion show, they actually brought a person on the show and did an interview with them and said, hey, she goes, I fell into a river. I had my kid in the back seat and I got in the back. I'm trying to open the door. And she goes, and then I remembered Mythbusters. And she goes, as much as I didn't want it, I had to wait for the water to flip the car before I could open the door and we could get out of there. And basically watching Mythbusters saved her and her child's life.
That's awesome. Very cool. Sidebar on here, by the way. I said I haven't watched it yet. Do you know why I haven't watched it yet?
It's not available in Canada.
It's not available.
It is not. Discovery Canada is run by it on a different schedule, and some things are in sync, some things are not. And Mythbusters is one that always shows up like 6 months later.
Really? 6 months?
Yeah, it's a long time after. And in fact, I've owned 2 different DVRs since I got hooked on Mythbusters, and both of them I could not get. No, I've actually owned 3 different DVRs, and none of them could I get it to actually schedule right with the Discovery Canada. I had to always remember when it was on and set it to record repeats. If I said new only, it did not record. So, yeah.
It's a conspiracy.
Just need to get a big antenna and point it at Seattle. You'll be fine.
Or I just move in with you guys. I'll just split the time, half the year with you, Chris, half the time with USB.
Why not? So if I had to pick one for myself, they actually talked about it on the reunion episode, and that's what brought it to the top of my mind. It was when they made, well, it's one of 2 things, actually. It's when they made a balloon out of lead, because it's just a ridiculous concept to see whether, can we actually do this or not? There's really no value in doing it. It's just a challenge to, can we do it? And they actually did use very thin sheets of lead, taped and glued them together, and was able to make it fly. They had to suspend Adam from the ceiling because if you even touched this stuff or stepped on it, it would tear enough that it would lose its structural integrity. The other one I have to say I really enjoyed is when the Mythbusters actually proved you can polish a turd.
I also like when they did the duct tape one. That was good.
They've done like 4 episodes on duct tape. Man, there's been tons of
didn't know that.
marathons on because
There's
it's the
tons.
final season.
I remember one very, very specific myth about leaving your toothbrush in your washroom and how flushing the bathroom had a myth of like particles of poop flying around, and that they proved that there was no fecal matter that would in any measurable way exit at a considerable amount from the toilet bowl. It was pretty cool.
You know, now that you say that, you triggered 2 memories of mine. Number one is an early one where they prove that yes, poppy seeds can indeed falsely trigger drug fails.
Drug tests.
And the second one is a bunch of episodes when they get drunk and they drive. Let's be honest. How fun was that?
That was fun.
I don't remember that one.
They did some episodes where they did spy techniques and stuff, and they drove through abandoned neighborhoods trying to trick each other and dropping like spikes out the back of cars and things like that. Those guys, I've said it before, had the greatest job in the world. And the fact they got to do it for 14 years, that is awesome. It's an incredible achievement. And I'm sure they've reached out and they've inspired a lot of people. And watching the reunion show, it became very obvious of that when they talked to some of the fans, and you could see how moved all of the cast members were by, holy cow, this is the end. But boy, what a ride was it.
Yeah.
It's not just actually in the sciences, it's in the special effects. I mean, that's what they're from, right? The special effects business. Right. So they have engendered a whole new generation of that. My generation was really inspired by Star Wars. You know, the original Star Wars New Hope, not episode 1, but it's a good episode, right? And that was where a lot of the effects actually were translated in combination with CGI and really inspired a whole new generation. Jaws is another one about that same time where the shark actually moved and everything. And so that was back then. But then you jump forward into the early 2000s, early 2000s, right, is when they started. And that was engendering a whole new generation of, hey, look, this is possible or this is not possible. And this is how we have to fake it on TV. I think that's really where they started from, and I really enjoy it. So it's not just the sciences, although that's pretty cool too. It's everything else.
Well, I mean, you mentioned it. Most of their backgrounds were, I think everyone but Carrie had worked for ILM at one point in time. And I think the bulk of them had worked on the prequels for Star Wars. And that's how a lot of them had met before Mythbusters happened.
Yeah, everybody know how Carrie got it?
Yeah, they 3D modeled her butt.
Yep. Yeah. That
In the
was,
first
that was
episode,
her
or second
introduction.
episode.
Yeah, one of the first. They needed a volunteer, and I think she was like PAing or something like that.
She was an intern.
Oh,
They
that's
actually
right.
talked about it. They talked about it in the reunion is the first time people saw her, it was her holding her ass up so they could do a 3D measurement of it. And she's like, this is just some rinky dink cable TV show. No one's ever going to see it. And go fast forward 14 years. And yeah.
Everybody's seeing her rear end.
And for those that aren't familiar, they were
And the
testing a
front.
myth as to
Holy.
they were testing a myth as to whether if you flushed the toilet on an airplane, whether you could get stuck to it while you were sitting on it.
Yeah. Yeah, they sure found a myth that just fit it quite nicely. You know, I'm sure they had the myth thought of first. Well, it is sad, and I do look forward to watching it when it does air in the Canadian parts, or when I do fly down to the States and watch it completely legally while I'm in the States.
Yeah, because you're coming down for C2E2, right?
Obviously.
You'll just watch it then.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. Well, let's move on a little bit from here. From a somewhat exciting piece of news that you had there, because, you know, it was an exciting run, to a very sad piece of news. Ray Tomlinson has died. Now, do you guys know who Ray Tomlinson is?
I do now.
Yes.
Did you know who he was before I put it in the notes for tonight?
I did because I
vaguely
heard it
remember.
on TV.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I vaguely remember hearing about him years and years ago. Yeah.
Okay. So for those not familiar, Ray is essentially deemed the modern email inventor. Ray was the one who, for one, he was, of course, responsible for the @ symbol. You know how you put @ in your email address? He's the guy that chose that, but he was really the one that sent the very first email on ARPANET, which was a computer network that was created for the U.S. government. And originally, the test that was done, obviously he knew what he was doing, but he was quoted as saying the test messages were entirely forgettable and I have therefore forgotten them. So I didn't know about this actually until the news of his passing today. I think that is actually kind of a neat history of email, that the first email tests were completely forgettable, so nobody knows what they were.
It was probably pornographic. And he was like, yeah, I don't want this out there.
I forgot. But it's sad, though, because, he was the guy behind modern email. And he's been quoted as well over the years. He says, I'm often asked, did I know what I was doing? And he says, the answer is, yeah, I knew exactly what I was doing. I just had no notion whatsoever about what the ultimate impact would be. And you can see that, right? Because the idea of email, right? Like, you're creating it for the US government. You're probably so used to dealing with things that don't go to the general public, and to have it just go to the entire world and change the way we see everything in the world. It must have been pretty incredible for him, looking back and seeing his invention have such a drastic change on the world.
Yeah, this explains why the United States Postal Service is actually creating a Terminator and a time machine to send the Terminator back to go after Tomlinson's mother. I think that is what is really going on here.
Right. And in the chat, Suncast says, unlike Alexander Graham Bell and the telephone.
Well, I think Bell knew what he was doing. I think he knew why he was doing it. Yeah. And I think he knew not to swear when he was actually talking.
Yeah. So I'll admit it. I did not know who he was until I did hear about his passing today. But I felt very, very strongly that I should put this in here as a news point, because he's a legend. He is a legend as far as the world goes, the way that we communicate. And it's kind of surprising, to be honest, that we didn't know who he was. And he wasn't a recognizable name, in my opinion. I think that it's bizarre that we didn't know that.
Yep. No Elon Musk.
Is.
Or maybe the government version of Elon Musk. And you never know who the govies are.
That's why we didn't know, because the government suppresses it. They suppressed it.
So everybody knows about Oppenheimer and the nuclear bomb, but nobody knows the rest of the team that was probably largely in charge of actually creating this new weapon, right? Now, that's for bad, not for good, but Oppenheimer is who everybody remembers. Nobody remembers everybody else. So as far as email goes, everybody's going to remember Skynet. Nobody's going to remember poor old Ray Tomlinson, which, let's face it. Yeah, you said it, Stephen. He did a monumental thing for everybody.
He did.
That's true.
Well, moving on from that news point to something a little bit more positive, something that should make SP smile and say, told you so, because that's what he said to me. SP, what do you got?
Told you so. Okay. So we've been really geeking out in the past couple of weeks over this SES-9 Falcon 9 launch. And by the way, JS, you asked a question a couple of weeks ago. What does a Falcon 9 cost? Well, I looked it up for you. It's $60 million just for the rocket. So if you can save part of that, that's a few $1 million, right? Of hardware you don't have to build. So
A lot of money.
they launched, it's more than I
Canadian,
can afford. National product, right? Gross national product. So they launched it, but the important part, as we were talking about last week, is that they launched it and they were able to live stream it. Now, when they actually live streamed the actual launch, they had like a party coverage going on and then the technical coverage going on, which is really cool. And because if you're just interested in the launch, you could watch that. If you're interested in the party, you could do that. If you're at your computer with two screens, you can watch them both at the same time. So that was pretty cool, and it's how I did it. And I think that's how Steven did it as well.
Yeah.
So the launch went off okay. And it was phenomenal because the high-speed camera that was on the rocket body actually was pointed at the rocket bell, and it got real red hot. It was amazing how it just glowy hot. You almost saw through the rocket bell because it was so hot. Almost went completely white there. But it was cool. It launched, and the launch was successful. It got the satellite up to orbit. But when they tried to capture the Falcon 9 first stage on the barge, apparently it was just going too fast. And we were watching it live, and we had no idea where they were going to try to do this, if it was coming back to the Cape or not. I didn't look into the launch profile, but apparently it was too high of an arc trajectory, and it came down really hot on the barge, and it just didn't have enough fuel left to slow it down to the point where it could safely land. And so we're watching the barge on this webcam, this really pixelated webcam for about, 5-7 frames. And all of a sudden you see this white big thing and then a little red dot, and then everything goes blank and you get a test screen on it. We're like, yeah, that's probably not very good. And it wasn't until later that I'm trying to remember, it was like an hour later or something like that.
Yeah, and it was Elon Musk that actually commented.
Yeah, Elon Musk came up and he said basically that rocket landed hard on the drone ship. Didn't expect this one to work. Hot reentry, very hot reentry. But the next flight has a good chance. And again, we're talking about a piece of a rocket that's throwaway anyway, and they're just trying to recapture that. And the engineers, when Elon Musk was telling them what he wanted them to do, they were probably like, "You want us to do what?" And so they probably went about it, and they made this barge like extra strong and everything. You know what? I do need to do some research into that barge to see how hardy it's actually made. But they probably told Elon, "Look, we're probably going to get 1 in 10 out of I forget the actual number that SpaceX said, but if I was the engineer, I'd be like, okay, so you're going to lose your first 25. And then after that, you're probably going to get 1 in 10. Is that worth it for you? And he'd probably say, heck yes, that's worth it. We're trying something new. I like this idea. So the launch was successful. It was a great party to be had by all. SpaceX did a great job in pumping it up. So that was all cool. But the Falcon 9 first stage is lost. So congratulations on a great party and a great launch, and we hope you get it right next time on the landing.
For sure. Now, I ended up actually watching this myself. We were actually just about to record Better Podcasting on the GonnaGeek Network at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. And I did watch this just before we were going to go. Now, here's the thing. We talked last week about how boring the previous launch attempt was. Well, as SP mentioned, there were 2 launch streams, a technical webcast and a full webcast. Now, either the full webcast was because of everybody's prior comments, or perhaps we just missed the full webcast before. I didn't look into it, but I want to comment that maybe it existed, because that there is that chance. And I came across a Reddit article after the before the successful launch and after the last launch the failed launch that we discussed last week. And there was a Reddit article that actually came out and said, FYI, in the future, Joe Schmo, whatever his name was, his commentary will not be in the technical webcast anymore. So it almost sounded like maybe, yeah, the full webcast was there before, but I don't know if anybody knows about that. Please do let us know. You can reach us at GonnaGeek. You can find us at 567-343-GEEK. That's 567-343-4335, or at facebook.com/GonnaGeek. So I don't know. Regardless, I was pretty impressed with their full webcast. Lots of hoopla. It was a little bit behind. It was about a 3-second delay over the technical, but like SP said, just dual stream them.
Yeah, it was fun. I also have a couple other callbacks. First of all, we discussed the Google barges a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about exploring new technology like virtual reality technology and stuff like that. And I said, oh, well, Google brought these barges in to do this showmanship over Google Glass. Well, I did some research, and the Coast Guard actually shut it down. The Coast Guard had fire concerns, multiple fire concerns over the course of a few years, and then finally they just said, you're not fixing it. This will never work. These will never be accredited for passengers. So Google pulled the plug basically on them and decided to go another route there. But it was probably a little bit of a mistake, a financial mistake on their part. I'm just shocked that they couldn't redesign them. But apparently if they did, it would have been too costly. So they just scrapped them. So there's that. And then there was a question that JS had about are astronauts ever quarantined when they come back because they go out to space, whatever? And the answer is no. ever since Apollo, none of the astronauts, whether they're in space, inside the ship or station, or whether they take a spacewalk, none of them have been quarantined since Apollo.
Well, that's pretty cool information.
You know, I have a question about that though. Like I was thinking about it, and I had thought that yes, they probably were no longer quarantined. That was sort of my understanding. Really? It was just something that I kind of had this feeling. I don't know. Maybe it was reading a Wikipedia article on the old Apollo missions. I don't know. But I like the original quarantine was a lot to do with the fact that we didn't know. We had never sent anybody up there, right? It was very, very precautious, right?
Yeah, we had never recovered anything from the moon before, basically, and we were bringing back all these moon rocks and dust and everything. Yeah.
So then we realized that space aliens don't exist. So we stopped the quarantine. But now, the reason JS asked about this a couple weeks ago was, what was your reason for it, JS?
I think we were talking about colonization on other planets, or at least visiting other planets, and the fear came because they do a lot of biology tests on the space station, International Space Station, and they actually mutate viruses to see how they react in space, and they react extensively virally. They mutate completely, become very viral. So I hadn't done any research, but I mean, just logically assumed that if viruses that they test, that they bring up viruses up there, right, to test them, that obviously you would, if it reacts the way it does in a petri dish, it probably reacts the same way in the human body. So I would assume that they would quarantine them at least for half quarantine.
Right. And that's why I'm wondering if we're going to head back towards a quarantine thing. Like if there's going to be something that's going to happen, and we're going to see that, yes, they do mutate quite differently in space or whatever, right? Space pathogens. And then we're going to head back that direction, because now we're starting to get more educated, and we are realizing about the potential with viruses in outer space.
Well, they found bacteria and viruses mutate extremely virulently. I can't say that word in English, man. I'm sorry. They mutate extremely badly due to cosmic rays and so on, and the radiation they get bombarded with up there. And it piqued my interest. I'm surprised they haven't quarantined anybody since the Apollo program. Mind you, the Apollo program has set foot on an alien body. So I'm sure if we repeat that on Mars or on an asteroid or on wherever else, they'll probably quarantine just as a precaution. I mean, you don't want to War of the Worlds it in reverse, right?
Yeah.
And catch some space bug that'll just wipe us all out.
Well, I think since the NASA has found out that there is nothing that they found on the moon or in space or whatever to date, that they don't need to actually quarantine anybody when they come back. And also these experiments, if there is a breach in the experiment, I would fully expect that there would be a quarantine. However, there has never been a breach in that, because the experiments don't happen in a petri dish out in the open. They're in these controlled little boxes, and they're sealed and nothing can get in or get out. And that's how that happens.
Anybody got any final comments here on the Falcon 9 or any of the other news stories? Chris?
I got nothing, man.
Alrighty then. Let's just go ahead and move into this week's segment. Shall we do that? Alrighty, so this week we are bringing it back. It is SP's Super Space Symposium of Death. Go ahead, SP.
Yes, because we are talking about making a Death Star way out in the space, right? that costs a lot of money. Well, it's not a Death Star, but it does cost a lot of money. So we've talked about the Hubble before. We've talked about Kepler. So 2 space observatories that NASA has put up there to search for the histories of the universe and search for other planets, life on other planets, stuff like that. And they're both basically in the visual range. Now, the next and last telescope in the near visual range that I've grouped in there is the James Webb Space Telescope. It is not in space yet. As a matter of fact, it's due to launch in October 2018. It is horribly behind schedule, amazingly behind budget. In 2011, they thought it was going to, or 2003, they thought it was going to cost $1.6 billion. Well, guess what it's at now? $8.8 billion. That's a lot of cash. So why are we still doing it? Okay, so the James Webb Space Telescope has been called the replacement of the Hubble. So the Hubble's not going to live forever. It might actually outlast James Webb. I doubt it, though, because the batteries on board are going to need changing, and the gyroscopes to keep it stable aren't going to last that long. But James Webb is going to launch in October 2018. At least that's the schedule today. And it's going to go to the Lagrange Point 2. Does anybody know where Lagrange Point 2 is?
I would say Ask ZZ Top.
Well played. That's a Steven joke. High five. Yeah.
Okay.
It's good. It's a good song. It's a good song. We should play it right now and make fun of it so it's legal to play on Google.
Go ahead, SP.
So Lagrange Point 2, or L2, is actually, it's a steady point, an orbital point on the far side of the sun. So if the Earth is looking at the sun, it is going to always be on the other side of the Earth from the sun. And so it's going to be on the outside of the orbit, and it's going to always be looking outward. And the reason for that is to hide as much of the heat and light from the sun as possible. It's pretty cool the way they have actually designed this thing. There's 5 layers of kites to act as a light shield and a heat shield, because some of these infrared instruments need to be close to absolute zero in order to work. So they need to shield it from heat, they need to shield it from light, so it won't get blinded. So it's going to launch from French Guiana on an Ariane 5 rocket, which, by the way, JS, goes for $137 million a piece. The weight of the satellite, it is. The weight of the satellite itself is going to be about 14,300 pounds, or for your Canadians, about 6,500 kilograms. It's got 4 different instruments on board. We'll talk about those in a second, but it's largely going to be in the near visual, so infrared and some, I believe there's an ultraviolet instrument on it as well. It's going to be operated mainly by NASA just because it's going to be in the United States. It's going to be operated out of Baltimore, but there's 17 countries that have banded together, including the Canadian Space Agency, in order to make this thing happen. And NASA was capped a couple years ago at $8 billion by Congress. They said, can't go any more than that. You get $8 billion for the life of this project. Any more than that, and you're out. So there you go. It was named, by the way, after James Webb, who is the second NASA administrator who was a big proponent of the Apollo missions. So when we talked about the Hubble, we talked about the 4 great NASA observatories. The Hubble, which we talked about, the Compton Gamma Ray Observatory, which we haven't talked about yet, the Chandra X-ray Observatory, which we haven't talked about yet, and the Spitzer Space Telescope, which we haven't talked about yet. But the important thing here is that the James Webb will be a direct replacement and an increase of capabilities over both of the Hubble and the Spitzer Space Telescope. So it's a next generation sort of thing. As a matter of fact, that's what its original name was, the Next Generation Space Telescope. So what do we got? Well, the mirror is actually not one mirror. It's 18 separate hexagonal shaped mirrors. And it is in total, when you mass them all together, 6.5 meters across, which is roughly about 21 feet across. And we talked about the sun shield before, the 5 layers of the kite, and the 4 instruments that it has on board. Get your geek on, get your tech on here. The near infrared camera, or the NIRCam, the near infrared spectrograph, or the NIRSpec, the mid infrared instrument MIRI, and this is the one that needs to be kept at 6 degrees Kelvin. That's 6 degrees above absolute zero. That's really cold. And the one that should be touted by two of the individuals on this podcast, the fine guidance sensor / also known as the near infrared imager and slitless spectrograph. Do you guys know what agencies, responsible for putting that one together?
It's NASA.
No.
I was going to go with the John Stamos research of hair loss.
It's if that's what you want to call the Canadian Space Agency, we're on it. Yes, they're in charge of pointing this thing in the right direction. So without the Canadians on board, this thing might be pointed completely in the wrong direction and taking pictures of gosh only knows what, which it still might. I mean, think if you turned it back on Earth, think of the great images you might be able to get.
Yeah, so, you mean the ones of you in your house with the thing and the thing and
with the thing in the place with the people, right? Okay, so here's the important part: the missions of the James Webb Space Telescope. It's going to look back 13.5 billion years. So that's roughly, within a billion years of the start of the universe. So it's going to be looking and peering into the way galaxies and stars are born. And to complement sort of the Kepler mission, it's going to be looking at the atmospheres of extrasolar planets. Now, there is a website which I definitely think you should go look at. It is www.jwst.nasa.gov. You'll see pictures of this thing. You'll see live pictures of it being in assembly. There's 2 webcams there, and you'll see all of the frequently asked questions and explanations and cool pictures about what this thing is and what it's going to do. So I'm really excited for when this thing goes up. It's going to after it launches, it's going to take a month to get up to the Lagrange point. So it's going to be Christmas time 2018 before we actually start to see some pictures. And like I said, it's near visual. It's not visual. So they're going to have to be doctored into the visual wavelengths once they get back in post-processing.
That's really cool. I actually didn't know that it was non-visual.
Yeah, it won't be Hubble. It won't be true visual, but that's actually for the best because you'll be able to see more outside the visual wavelengths.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. I guess my little Canadian brain didn't realize that.
That's
Don't
why
forget
you're not
Canadian
in charge.
Brain pointed it in the right direction.
Thank you, JS.
That's right. That's why you're not in charge of the actual scientific instruments, just where to point it.
Well, that's awesome. That's great. And do you have a tease for the audience about what your next research project is going to be on SP's Super Space Symposium of Death?
Actually, I gave it away already. We're going to transition into the infrared space telescope. So the first one that I'm going to take a look at would be the Spitzer Space Telescope, which is one of the 4 original great NASA observatories. So really looking forward to that one.
That's awesome. Very cool. Very cool indeed. So I guess that is taking us to the end of the show. Before we do wrap up, we'll go around. We'll talk about what we want to talk about and make fun of what we want to make fun of. And not that I'd be making fun of it, but would you guys agree that if a video got like 375,000 dislikes on YouTube, it would be pretty incredible, don't you think?
Dislikes.
That guy probably made money. It has so many
that's what I was
dislikes.
thinking.
No, 345,000 dislikes.
Yeah, he's definitely made
not
money.
75.
Is there an ad that loads before the video?
No, it's called the Ghostbusters trailer, actually. The Ghostbusters trailer apparently got 345,000 dislikes. And just to put this in perspective, the Batman versus Superman trailer only is around 14,000 dislikes. Is that not incredible or what?
It's got almost twice as many dislikes that have likes.
I don't have the YouTube pulled up, and if I pull it up right now, it's going to play into the podcast. What is the likes count at right now, JS?
170.
It's at 170, and the dislikes is currently standing on 630. How much?
360.
360. Wow. So it's gone up an extra
Good change.
15,000 from when I read about it today. Wow. That's insane.
Is that just Bill Murray pressing dislike over and over again?
Totally is Bill. Oh, man. That's rough.
Oh,
That's
man, I
really
can't believe
bad.
that. I mean, I'm not planning on going and seeing the movie, not for anything against the actors or anything. It's just, I know what kind of humor it's going to be, and it's not going to be funny to me. That's why I'm not going to go see it, but I wouldn't dislike the trailer. I mean, geez.
Yeah, wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. And in the chat, Suncast says the fan recut for the trailer is better. I have not seen the fan recut, but you're not the first person to tell me that, so I'll have to check it out. Chris, you saw it, didn't you?
Yeah, the pacing is much better in the fan recut trailer. I thought it was better in that regard.
I'm still going to see this movie. It looks interesting. It's the Ghostbusters. Not supposed to take itself seriously.
That's true.
There was a couple funny moments in there. There was actually, I think it was Kristen Wiig. I was actually surprised. I was a little bit surprised that I laughed along. So
Yeah, it's going to be a bit childish, like those actors are all known to be. But I mean, if you know that's what you're getting into.
for sure. Well, anybody got anything else that you want to talk about? You got some video that has 361,000 dislikes.
There's one thing that's really, really cool. There was a lot of doubt that Slimer was going to be in the movie, and that was confirmed by this trailer, by the way. At exactly 1 minute 36.
Awesome.
Just saying.
Chris, you got anything you want to talk about or plug or promote?
Make sure you go check out all the awesome content over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. We got all sorts of podcasts to tickle your geek bone.
Awesome. SP, you got anything you want to promote or plug? Maybe that's something that rhymes with Miru.
Absolutely. The Chicago Comic and Entertainment Expo going on the 18th, 19th, and 20th of March. There's going to be a GonnaGeek panel on the 18th of March. That's Friday, 2:45 p.m. in room S503. We'll be talking about giving away just tips and tricks for everyday podcasting for your hobby podcast or passion podcaster. Ooh, passion. Hubble hater. Yeah, that's me.
JS, you got anything you want to promote or talk about?
Yeah, I'm going to promote one of my friends' podcasts. It's called Geeks of the North. It's for people who like hobby gaming, I guess, the tabletop gaming. They it's a lengthy podcast, but it's pretty interesting if you like tabletop gaming, as I do as well. Listen to them. It's a buddy from Montreal. Started about a year ago.
That's awesome. Always love the fellow Canadian podcasters. They don't care what you're talking about. You could be talking about your gym socks. I'll support you.
Yeah.
And I guess that is going to go ahead and wrap us up for this week's GonnaGeek.com podcast. For episode 136 of the official GonnaGeek.com podcast. I think we only got like 10 dislikes on YouTube.
I am not a Hubble hater.
I am the Hubble hater.
And I am going to go dislike our videos.
Audio listener, I've got a title on screen right now that says SP Hubble Hater. Bye!
From everyone here at the GonnaGeek.com podcast, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes. We encourage you to send your feedback by email to podcast@GonnaGeek.com. You can find all of our show history at GonnaGeek.com/official podcast. And while you're there, why not head over and check out all of the geeky podcasts on the GonnaGeek Network. The music heard on this show is by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.